Lots of people treat LinkedIn like a billboard. They pick a look, post some updates, hope the right people notice. And when it doesn't work, the instinct is to fix the tactics. Better headlines, more hashtags, although we don't use those anymore, maybe a new posting schedule, try some new formatting. But tactics built on a story you haven't found yet, that won't save you. Today's guests on Strategy Talks has been helping entrepreneurs and consultants do the harder, more important work first, uncovering the story that makes everything else on LinkedIn actually land. Once you have that story, the strategy almost writes itself. This is Strategy Talks. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Dorien Morin-van Dam.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Strategy Talks. And today we have a repeat guest. We were just talking in the green room. I'm very excited to reintroduce you to my friend Anneke. But before I do, I want to welcome all of you who might be live with us right now on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or on YouTube. If you're watching this, let us know in the comments that you are and where you're joining us from. And a special shout out to those of you, many of you, who listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast week after week. I appreciate you so much. So I'm going to introduce you to Anneke van der Voort. Anneke lives in the Netherlands, and you and I have known each other for quite a few years online, right?
I think more than 10 years or so. I think was at the beginning of when I started off with PR Minded that we met through Facebook, I think.
Yeah.
And then
And
we
yet
even had
we
a
still
small.
have not met in person.
That's really weird. Yeah, I think every time you visit the Netherlands, then there's always in the holiday season, so then I'm somewhere else most of the time. So,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that one day we'll see each other live.
Yes, that would be great because there is something about that, about meeting friends that you've, connected with for a long time and then meet them in real life. We were talking about that in the green room too, is there's nothing like live. And that's actually one of the reasons that this show, Strategy Talks, this year, 2026, every single episode is not pre-recorded. Every single episode is live because I want you, the listeners, the watchers, to have that same feeling of we're here and you're in the room with us. So if you have questions for myself, for Anneke, and for any guests that are here, you get to ask those questions because you're in the room with us. So that's really, really exciting. So we're going to talk about story before strategy, the LinkedIn edge. Anneke, let's talk about story, what that actually means on LinkedIn. When you talk about finding your LinkedIn story, what is it really that you mean? Is it telling a story or is it telling?
Yeah, the word story is a bit confusing because then we think about storytelling, the pressure of or telling interesting stories. No, the story is more like, I mean, what people often tend to do, like when you ask, what do you do? Of course, you tell, okay, I'm this or I'm that. What's your expertise? And so that's the basic stuff you mention when people start talking, when you're introducing yourself. But when it comes to your story, you actually go a level deeper or a layer deeper. It's more about, okay, so this is what you do, but why do you do what you do? What is it actually, what drives you? And why you do what you do and what motivates or drives you, that's actually also has a big impact on the way you approach things, the way you work with clients. That comes from something. So once you start, sort of uncovering the common thread between your experience, but also who you are as a person, your personality, and the way you do things. If you look at those things, then you find your story. So it goes further than just saying this is what I do. It's actually more the layer beneath, which actually tells your story.
All right. So then there's a difference between someone's story and their credentials, right? Because most people will lead with credentials and then wonder why nothing connects. Like I went
Mhm.
to the business school or I did, XYZ, I had a TED Talk. That's not your story. Those are credentials.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, it's also part of your story. It's also important to tell, let's say, hey, what did you do? But at the end of the day, I mean, there's always something that makes you getting out of bed. There's also always something that makes you tick, or that what you keeps coming back to. And the longer you work, the more you see the common threads in that. I mean, of course, when you start your career, you're still finding out, okay, what do I want to do with my studies? What does resonate with me? What type of people or organization I would like to work with? But if you, let's say, have 10, 20 years of experience, you can already see, hey, I make certain choices. I like to have certain conversations. And then you start, if you really look at that, then you already can see, hey, what is it what I try to keep doing all the time, whether it is in this position or that position. And then, of course, for an entrepreneur, it's even different because, yeah, you have to sort of, you compete in a certain field with other people with similar expertise. And then it's interesting to see, okay, I have a similar expertise on paper, but what is actually the difference between me and that person? And then it comes often to that deeper layer, because that is where the difference starts actually.
Right, because that's also why people would hire, some people would prefer to work with a consultant who is male versus female, or a consultant who has worked in, um, say, a large workplace, a corporate setting, or who's part of a startup, but also
Yeah.
maybe somebody who comes from a similar background or similar. I mean, it even goes deep into layers of similar religion or similar world views, right? So it does get a lot deeper. So, if you have a choice of 10 people who offer the same skills, then you're going to differentiate that. So, Annika, why do people have such a hard time finding this story or articulating this story? What is holding them back? Like, why can people not share that easily? Or why is it because it's hard to do that for yourself? Is that something, or is
Well,
it
I have a
different?
good example. I was yesterday talking to a client, and we were discussing ideas for his next blog post. And then he said, well, I want to talk about teams and actually how they perform, how they can make them perform better. And this is the model I use. And I look at the person, I look at the team, I look at the organization. I thought, all fine. But then I said, okay, the model you're using is actually the same model as another client of mine is using, just as an example. I said, so we have to look, what is your point of view? What is it what you add? And the moment we start talking about that, then something happens, because then you come to the real story of that particular person. Because he said, well, I like to look for purpose, the purpose of people, of the individual, the purpose of the team, the purpose of the organization. And if you start digging into that and start using that, then you create a team that performs well. And so that's his story. While the other team coach, maybe using the same model, might say, hey, I actually focus on top performance. I like to help people to perform at their best as an individual, as a team. And just what you mentioned, so that type of team coach probably suits another work culture, another organization, size, maybe even matter of the organization. So that's actually what's so important, that you know from yourselves, hey, what makes me tick? So and also what type of client then actually suits my way of working, my point of view. That already gives also a lot of direction towards your ideal client.
Yeah, that's it's really fascinating to me because sometimes it's this thing, the chicken or the egg, right? Sometimes it's like people are drawn to you because of a certain thing and you don't realize why they're drawn to you. And then, because I've had periods of my business life, I've been in business 15 years, where I was mostly working with female clients, right? They were female entrepreneurs. A lot of them were solopreneurs. And we really worked really well together. And then there was a period of time that all the new clients that came in were male. They were driven by a different, goal. And they found that whatever I had to offer would work well with their team. So sometimes it's who you already work with. And then sometimes it's, putting that vibe out there or that story out there to attract them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And it can also be that, let's say, you can solve different things with different clients. So some people might resonate because you have so much that why, the reason, what motivates, what drives you. There's so much connection. Well, what other clients, just what you say, you suit very well in the team because you solve a problem, a role in the team that they don't fulfill, and you are the perfect person to whatever, do the strategy in the social media. And then maybe if you look to the why of that person, that's maybe not 100% match, but still you can do your job very well. So that can also be a choice. I mean, in the ideal world, of course, you might say, oh, everything I'll do is 100% connected to my ideal clients. Yes, in the ideal world, yes, but it won't say that you can't help other people. It's more like the let's say the working together often flows more smoothly when there is a right match.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk some actionable ways that you get this story or their story out of your clients. How do you do this? What is the process like? Can you share a little bit? You don't have to give
Yeah.
us all your secrets,
No,
Anneke.
and it is not. It's not so secret. That's the interesting thing. It's about answering some questions for yourself or with someone, and then you, on the one side, you look at yourself like, hey, what is it? What I actually do? So, what's your core expertise at this point of time? What is my personality like? So you start asking questions. Where do I want to go to? Because that also is important. The skills you had 10 years ago might still be valuable, but you might want to move in a certain direction. So what is it actually what makes me tick? I mean, what is my motivation? What are my values? So you look at a whole spectrum of things. So you make a sort of analysis of yourself. Also, not only, let's say, with words, but also try to feel like, hey, what is it what I feel I want to go to? What is it what I feel I want to help people with? So also that emotional level is quite important. Sometimes also we look at, okay, what is, I always ask people make a sort of, write down the highlights, but it can also be things that made a lot of impact in your life, can be moving abroad, can be a loss at a young age or whatever. That also can have an influence on the way you do things. So a lot of things can come together. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. So you look at yourself as a person and as a professional. And then the question, of course, is, okay, of all the expertise you have, what is the kind of core? Because people always confuse, like, yeah, you have a lot of knowledge and expertise, especially when you're in the field longer. And then it can be confusing because you know so much, you can help people with so many things. Yeah, then the question is, okay, but what is it what you want to put out there? I mean, I'm a LinkedIn strategist, but I have a lot of other expertise, but I don't show it on LinkedIn. I mean, not at the front, not at the top in my headline, whatever. So that's the first step. Look at yourself as a professional and also as a person. And then on the other side, you look at your audience. People always find that also difficult, but yeah, there's many people I can work with. Well, you know probably you have the same challenges with your clients. They don't want to make choices, but what we already discussed, if you have looked at yourself, you already are steered into certain direction. Because if you never worked in a corporate world, it would not be so logical, especially when you're over 40, to say, oh, I make a move now to the corporate world. So often if you work for medium-sized companies or small companies and you're an entrepreneur, it's more logical to continue that, unless you want to make a big change. But so you start to actually discover your ideal clients. So who are those? What organizational size? What do they do? What are the problems that you want to solve for them? And then you bring these together. And especially the motivational side, what drives you, those are important questions, because that is what something you can always come back to. And your expertise, you can change that over time, you make shifts. But what is actually what makes you coming out of bed every day? I think that's very crucial also in the way of working with your clients.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you what was the question that was going to unlock something, but you've answered a lot of a lot of the different questions that could unlock something. So the next question is, how do you know when somebody has found their real story versus a polished kind of
Yeah.
thing that they think they should say? When do you know you struck gold when you're working with somebody?
Yeah, well, I know it when I often feel it literally in my body, yeah, because what you say. So if we will be talking, we can also talk like, hey, how do you do? And then we have some, oh, this is fine, blah blah blah. But then at a certain stage, you feel like, okay, yeah, this is we need to go deeper. It's the same in a conversation like that. People can initially start talking about a sort of website talk. Oh yeah, I do this and I do that. Okay, but what do you really do? What difference do you make in the life of a client? What happens when you work with a client in a session? So a variation of questions make that people start getting out of their sort of PR talk and starting to tell me the real story. And then at a certain stage I feel like, hey, but I think this is the core, this is the essence, probably what you do. So it is this also a bit unraveling actually from all the things they say, like you start the real story starts coming up. I mean, that's how it actually works. And also, yeah, I mean, then always feel something happening in my body, a sort of resonation. You feel like, okay, this must be the core. I try to give words to it and then say, actually, that's it.
Yeah. Is
So
there
it
anything that
helps.
people, I was going to say, is there anything that people leave out unintentionally that you have to poke them to get the answers to? If there's something like, oh, they don't want to talk about the personal life or is failures, are there things that people tend not to want to talk about, but that really brings home that story?
Well, it differs per person. Some people are not so much aware of the importance of understanding why they do things. So there's so much huge in talking about, okay, this is what I do, this is the process I go through with clients. Okay, that's all fine. It's all interesting and also relevant. But what is underneath that? So why is that so important? Well, and what is the result with your client? Okay, and why does that matter to you? That specific result, because it all often has an also a personal sort of. It resonates also with that person.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it important that people find clients through LinkedIn, but I find it more important that the visibility match with who they are, because
Right.
that's what I believe in.
Yeah. That makes
So
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
And then so translating that story, now we have a story. You've kind of given us the process of what that looks like. You dig, you find it, you polish it. Somebody has their story. How does it show up on LinkedIn profile? Like, where does it live and what does it change?
yeah, it lives first of all in the headline.
Okay.
Let's say that, I mean, it depends what kind of headline people have, but let's say some people have a headline with a lot of things. From in one line, they are leadership trainer, team coach, a financial specialist, for example. Once had that, and then it's like, okay, so it already your headline must show your core. And of course, you can combine things. It's not that you have to do one single thing, but it shows up. Is your headline clear? Does it make sense? Can people understand what you do? So clarity is already what you see in the headline. And then clarity beside that, ideally also shows something of the impact you create. I mean, you can say when we talk about a team coach, the one working with the top performing teams and the other one more on the purpose level. Well, that's something you should show in your headline, because that's how you differentiate from people doing similar work.
Hmm.
And even your ideal client in the headline helps, because then you have the complete story. Because then I know, okay, what you do, the way you do it, and for who you do it.
Okay.
And so your
So,
headline already is the first thing you
yeah.
see whether there is clarity and
Okay.
whether where there's resonation with the ideal client.
And then you recommend focusing on the core of the story to rewrite your headline.
Yeah, because people have to understand what you do. And ideally, there's also something, if it's for them, because otherwise it's like, okay, it can be for any kind of organization. And there must be something in it which either shows something of your approach, but then also ideally on a deeper level, can also then be a slogan or something.
Okay. And then where
Yeah.
else does it go? Where else does that
Yeah,
story?
then where else it goes? It goes, of course, in your about section. Yeah, there if you have much more text there, you can literally write your whole story, and you can ask questions that resonate with your ideal client to start off with. Then you can say like, okay, this is where I come from, this is what I do, this is what I help you with, and this is why I help you with that. And there comes again your why. The why of Simon Sinek around the corner. So that's what I also would include. It can
Mm,
even be part of your featured section if you write content on LinkedIn. Ideally, you not only write blogs or posts about what you can do, but also your why is involved in your stories, in your content. So then you highlight some blogs, for example, or articles or posts where that element is also demonstrated, where that
mm,
particular part of you is demonstrated. So people get a feel when they scroll to your profile, they get a feel like, okay, this is not just a leadership consultant. I get an idea of their approach because that article he or she wrote, hey, that's about this specific topic. The headline says something, the about section says something, and then even in your experience, you can talk about your approach. So there's
yeah.
many sections. Your recommendations, yeah. I mean, if I look at recommendations, I always get a feel the way people work. And
Mm,
maybe people don't write a recommendation about your why, and it goes a bit too far. But there is always something between the lines that you can get a feel. Is someone really focusing very results oriented, very human oriented, very pragmatic, or a combination of that? And that's not your why, but that also shows something of your personality, which is also a very important part of who you are.
that
So
makes that makes a lot of sense. And you jumped ahead to where I was going next. Is
sorry.
okay. No, that's good. So the story, you've got your story. You helped us figure out how to do that. You can adjust your LinkedIn profile, but then we need to insert it in the content. So you mentioned all the different places where it can go, but specifically content. Does knowing your story make content easier to write? And what shifts for people once they have their story? Do you find that it's easier to write content when you have that story? And then are there certain formats that work better once you have a story?
Well, what happens is maybe the writing depends, of course, if you're an easy writer or not, but you get that deeper layer. Just like I was discussing with my clients yesterday, I could have said, okay, I've got your story. We're going to write a post about team performance and we use your model. Fine. But then there's nothing, no specific point of view of this client in that article. So the moment start asking, but what do you do different? What do you do different from another team coach, etc.? Then the real story came out. So that should be included in the blog post. So I get a feel of his approach and where that comes from, what kind of beliefs is underneath it. So, I mean, I won't say in every single post that must be there, but throughout your content, you want to show it. That can be if you make a slider, the type of questions you ask to your audience, if it's a slider with questions, or the way you address a certain topic.
That makes sense. That makes a
Yeah,
lot.
because yeah, so what is it what you talk about? And I think it's getting more and more important in the field where there's so many people with similar expertise or different expertise but solving the same problem. Because I mean, yeah, there are many ways to solve a problem. Then it comes really down, who are you? Who are you as a person? So at least that you stand out from the people they can choose from with your expertise, because they feel like what you say that resonates, that does something inside, it resonates with me. That's actually what's happening, and
Yeah.
that's what you want. I mean, and that can't happen from one single post, because otherwise you have to put everything in one single post. But the best compliment I feel I can get is that when people say, I read your comment, and yeah, somehow the way you approach LinkedIn or whatever, or content, that's also how I want to do it, because it feels human to me. It feels that I get to know you, and that's a compliment, because then okay, people get an idea of who I am.
Yeah.
And that's actually what you want.
Yeah. So what do you tell people who worry that or think that their story isn't interesting enough? What do you tell them? Because, you
Yeah, and
know,
then I tell them you don't have to be interesting, you just have to be valuable, and that's something you already can do because you have a lot of knowledge and experience, and that's what you can share. The only thing is, yeah, it helps if you know how to do that on LinkedIn. I mean, that you not put your all your knowledge in one post, and that you give your audience small bites, once at a time, so they can absorb it. So I tell them like, so that's already something to realize. Yeah, what you do is valuable, because I always ask them, okay, so when you enter a conversation with a new client, is the first thing you say, well, I've nothing interesting to tell you? No, of course not. Said, okay, so what do you tell that client? He's probably already happy with the first conversation. Well, that's the same on LinkedIn. And then, okay. Then they see that point of view. Yeah.
That
So
makes
that
sense.
already helps people to make them a bit understand that what you have to offer is really valuable, but you have to look at it from a different way. And also,
Right.
you don't have to be interesting for your peers. Now, you have to be interesting for those who you want to reach on LinkedIn, for your ideal
That's a tough
clients.
one. Why don't you repeat that one?
Yeah, well, because I mean, and it's tempting because sometimes you feel like, yeah. I had a LinkedIn workshop this morning with a group of researchers, and there is a tension. Like, on the one hand, you want to share your results with other researchers, but also with people working with the results in the field, and they have, of course, a different type of knowledge, much more pragmatic.
Mhm.
So if you focus on that last that audience, then you might feel, yeah, the researchers think, oh, is that the knowledge you got? That's really superficial.
Yeah.
But depending on what kind of audience you're talking to, so then include in the post, for example, who you're writing for between the lines. But so you always know who you write for instead of writing for your peers, because then you start to talk about topics that are not of interest for your clients.
No, that makes so much sense. And that's a good reminder to all of us. So I've got two more questions. We're almost at the end. So how do you help people stay consistent with their story over time, especially when LinkedIn can start to feel performative? What do you say to people? How do you tell people to be consistent?
Well, it helps to first sort of be aware of your story. So what we talked about, and if you go through the process with someone or you just do it yourself, you feel like, okay, this is my story, this is my point of view, this is my why, this is what motivates me. So you know, okay, this is actually what I want to tell, this is what I bring to LinkedIn. That's already what it starts with. Of course, then you're not consistent on itself, but you feel motivation. I mean, when there's no motivation to write, or you don't know why you would do it, then it already doesn't work. So that's already the start of becoming consistent with your story, at least. And then to stay consistent on LinkedIn, it also is important, in my perspective, to think ahead. Like, okay, what kind of topics can I derive from my story? So what kind of topics does it result in? Where am I going to? What next week or the week after? What I can talk about, and how can I integrate my story then in that post? So it's also is important to think ahead. So a bit of planning and thinking ahead is also important to stay consistent.
Okay.
And also accept that sometimes you lose your motivation for content writing. That's, I think, part of the process as well. And then you start repurposing part of your content, so that when you have a dip in motivation, well, use some content from a month before, and then make sure that you recover from your dip, from your inspiration
and then
dip.
go and
Find
then go
ways to do that. Talk
yeah.
to uh, talk to peers, that, because that can also help. And also, yeah, try to go back to your drive, what drives you again, because I think always when you go back to that, then you feel, okay, yeah, this is why I do it, this is why I help
Yeah.
clients, so this is why I also like to show myself on LinkedIn or other social media.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. So I'm going to have you talk to the audience that's listening, that's watching. What's one thing somebody can do right now this week to start finding or sharpening their LinkedIn story? What's one thing you would tell them to do?
Well, go through what you've written down, and do you feel that when your ideal customer reads your profile, that they understand why, what drives you, what motivates you to do your work? Do you feel like, okay, if they look to your profile, that your full you is actually represented there? That's what I would do, because that's already a first scan. I mean, most people haven't looked at a profile for a while. And then you can quite easily see, yeah, okay, it's all there, but it's not me. It's not what I actually bring to clients. So if you feel there's a gap, that's the first gap you actually have to, what you call it, to bridge.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, Annika, thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to close out right on time. Before we leave, where can people find you online, and what is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, well, I would say write me a connection request all through LinkedIn. So Anneke van der Voort, then you find me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to connect and to take it from there.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much that you're with me for a second time, Annika. I always love having you on the show. Those of you who are here and staying all the way to the end, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. If you have questions, put them in the comments below wherever you're watching this video, and we'll make sure to answer them when we can. I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.